What's up, everybody? Happy Monday, brand new week, the last week of the NFL preseason. Thank goodness. I am ready to turn the page from the preseason, and we got one more to go here in Chicago this weekend. Probably not going to see a lot of starters, although there's a couple position battles still up in the air. So we'll see if maybe a couple of those guys get into the game. This is Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast brought to you by Tops Friendly Markets. With over 30 ready-to-grill burgers, Tops is the place to pick out the juiciest, most delicious burgers in town. From beef and turkey to chicken and veggie, you'll find something for everyone. Taste the flavors of the world with unique toppings and twists on the classic burger. Tops World of Burgers is yours to explore. What is up, Ryan?
Hey, not too much. Excited to talk some Bills football with, like you said, 1 week of preseason to go. We're inching closer and closer to roster cut down day, so plenty to get into.
Yeah, and you're still in the closet in Buckeye, Arizona, which we appreciate you taking some time from your lovely family getaway over the last couple weeks or last week or so. You'll be out there for a couple more. When do you get back, actually?
I get back on the 30th.
The 30th. Nice.
Yes.
Got the big flight. How many members of the family go out there?
Oh, this one's just my family. My
Oh,
wife
okay. Because I remember last year
so.
it was like a whole pilgrimage, right?
Yeah, that was something. That was something to say the least. And so now we just kind of do our own individual families, which I think that's the way to go.
Cool. So basically what this episode is going to be about is, like, Ryan and I both went back and watched the game back. We have some kind of takeaways because it was really panic mode there on Saturday. I mean, watching it, and I really tried not to overreact at Acrisure Stadium as we were doing that show, because I feel like a lot of times, like even when Sean McDermott has mentioned, it's never as bad as it seems. It's never as good as it seems, right? When you go back and you kind of get into the nitty gritty of things. And where I want to start is Dion Dawkins, because I asked Sean about him yesterday and he was pretty honest about it. He said, listen, there's some plays where he thought that, they, broke down on the edge on both sides. He said Dion Dawkins, and there were some things that he did well as well. There were some things that, and he knows that there were some plays where he might have left out there, if you will, and put Josh Allen in jeopardy. But I will say, going back and watching the 22 pass block snaps, or 19, I believe, that Dion Dawkins had, it was not nearly as bad as I felt it was watching it live. There was really like two plays where he got beat, and you can't really have those. You're going to have them, and I think it helps to have a guy like Josh Allen who can kind of be mobile back there, move around in the pocket. We saw him do that a couple of times. But what stood out to me about Dawkins' game, Ryan, is that I really thought he was a lot quicker than he's looked throughout training camp in that game. I thought he was getting to his spot pretty consistently, with quickness, moving his feet really fast, getting out of his stance, getting back into position, and dealing with a young, speedy pass rusher like Alex Highsmith. There were some impressive reps that he had there. Of course, you're going to focus in on the ones that didn't go as well.
Yeah, I think that's just it. When you're watching it live and you see someone kind of go right around him or get right to the quarterback, those stick out in your mind. But when you go back and you rewatch the game and you see that he did actually come out of his break pretty well multiple times, he held up pretty decently. You can talk about the right side as well with Spencer Brown. I thought one of the penalties against him was kind of bogus watching it back. I thought he had some decent reps in there too. I understand, and I was right there with the Bills Mafia thinking, boy, this was a bad performance by the starting offensive tackles. The depth is shaky. It was better upon the rewatch. And we were talking about this pre-show. The one thing about the preseason is you're getting a small sample size, a small taste of what these players are going to do over the course of a 4-quarter game. So, you have every right to react to every snap that they're out there on the field. But it was a limited amount of time, and as they settle into these games, you expect them to kind of settle in, get better. I love that someone in the Shout Insider text group mentioned Dion Dawkins struggling a few years ago in week 1 against Pittsburgh, and how the Bills kind of came out and laid an egg in that. And then he later became a Pro Bowler that season. His play improved. It was just one bad performance. You got to take everything kind of in the preseason with a grain of salt.
Justin Tynan over on YouTube, thank you for the super chat, $4.99, throwing it down in the Shout live YouTube chat. And we always welcome those super chats, but for just $3.99 a month, you can become a Shout Bills insider, text insider. And what that gives you is complete access to Ryan and myself. I mean, we've been talking about this game for the last couple of days with the Bills fans in the Shout Insider text group. But we are going to take Justin's question because he is dropping the super chat. And if you drop a super chat, you get right to the front of the line. What's up with the Stephon Diggs stuff from Stephen A. Smith on First Take? I don't know if you saw the clip yet, Ryan. Did you see it?
I saw the clip this morning. Yeah.
So basically, Stephen A. Smith, I saw the clip briefly talking about, he's got sources. He's got sources deep in the Buffalo building that tell him that Stephon Diggs wants out of Buffalo, is unimpressed with the direction of the team, and that, he's not going to force his way out. And obviously there's years left on the contract. Listen, you got to consider the source. Listen, Stephen A. Smith, I actually do respect the dude, like the hustle and grind to get to the spot that he got to. He was a legit NBA reporter back in the day. I think really was one of the preeminent NBA reporters in the world. But when he starts talking about football, like remember a couple of years ago when he was talking about, I don't know if it was Mike Williams or Keenan Allen, and he like completely like called them the wrong name. I can't remember who it was now, but it was just the simplest thing. He went viral for that. The dude is not plugged in on the NFL, Ryan. Like, I'm not taking this too seriously. Stephon Diggs has come out and said this is where he wants to be. He's bought in. Did things look perfect the other night? Is this a kind of an interesting time for Stephen A. Smith to bring this up? Sure. But I think it's a lot to do about nothing. And I'm not really trusting the sources, if you will.
Yeah, that's well said. Listen, this organization under Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, there are a few leaks that come out of the building. I mean, think about how little the national media and the overall media has been able to report on this team over the years. They keep everything pretty tight-lipped. And if Adam Schefter and Ian Rappaport aren't reporting things like that, I highly doubt that Stephen A. Smith has some kind of deep sources within the organization or even within the players' camp that he'd be able to reveal this. So it's morning talk shows. There's a lot of these hosts that you kind of roll your eyes when you watch some of the things that they say, because I get it. They're covering every major sport on these shows. They're talking about a lot of different topics a lot of the time. But no, I would take what he said not too seriously when it came to Stephen A. Smith.
All right, we're going to do our biggest winners and losers from this game on Saturday, and we're going to go rapid fire. I want to come up with 4 or 5 each. I'm kind of throwing this at you out of the blue. We didn't talk about this going in.
You are.
But that's good because I think that we can kind of come at this and just talk about maybe the guys that really maybe raised their stock a little bit and some that are continuing to struggle. And I'll start things. Actually, I'll let you start things off
Okay.
just because I'm throwing this at you out of nowhere. Who is somebody that you thought really, raised their stock in this game?
Ryan Vandenmark. Again, the Bills have been short 2 tackles. All of a sudden, Brandon Shell's retirement, losing Tommy Doyle, which we learned the day after the preseason game. He's out for the year. The Bills have to figure out some things about the swing tackle position. Obviously, you have Dion Dawkins and Spencer Brown as your starters. I have David Questenberry slotted in as that swing tackle, but who's going to be tackle number 4? And I think it can be Vandenmark. And RVD for short had a really nice game against Pittsburgh at left tackle. He looks very comfortable there. And listen, I know his snaps and his reps at right tackle in the first preseason game left a lot to be desired. But finding a young player that looks this comfortable through 2 preseason games at left tackle is nothing to sneeze about. We've talked about him before. He went undrafted, but there were over 20 teams that offered him a spot on their practice squad after that draft. There were some physical traits that teams obviously liked, and the Bills have been able to kind of work on his game, develop him a little bit. So I thought, again, against Pittsburgh, he looked really good. And real quick, because he won't be mentioned in these players, we had a question about the Richard Grudge hype is the way it was put in terms of what's ever happened to that. He was outstanding the first preseason game for the Bills. I thought he was pretty good in the second preseason game too. It's just he's not moving up that depth chart. He's not climbing over anyone, at least in the preseason that we've seen. So for that reason, I have Vandenmark kind of slotted in as that tackle 4, but I think they probably like a lot about what Grudge has done too, and he'll be a priority practice squad type of player.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on Vandenmark. I think that he probably had his stock rise the most with this game, considering what's happening at the position with Shell and Tommy Doyle's injury, which we did learn yesterday, that he's going to be out for the season. Sean McDermott didn't specify the exact injury, but I do think that Vandenmark's been somebody that, especially at left tackle, I think the Bills have zeroed in on that spot for him. I mean, the week before against the Colts, he kind of split things up, played a lot of snaps at right tackle, none this week. He had 33 total snaps in this game. They were all at left tackle, 21 pass block snaps for him in this game, and he came out as the number 2 graded pass blocker via PFF. No pressures allowed, no hurries, no quarterback hits, about as clean a sheet as you can have as an offensive lineman. And he got an 82.3. The number 1 guy, and we got another question about him, Connor McGovern. And I think I'm going to go to him next as my a big winner, somebody that I think from a pass blocking perspective, this is exactly what they brought him in to be. I think there was only one game last year where Roger Saffold had above a 75 pass block grade, above 75. So, I mean, this is a really good development on a day where things weren't going well on the edge. On the interior, things were a little bit better. And people haven't heard a lot about Connor McGovern. Like, that's been part of, a lot of questions that have come in the last week or so. But I think a lot of that's been Ryan. He's been learning a new system. He's been doing some good things. And I think a lot of times when you're not noticing an offensive lineman, that's a good thing too.
Yeah, that's perfectly said. When you're not mentioning him in live game reps, it usually means he wasn't beaten on a play. He wasn't penalized on a play. And he did have one penalty against Pittsburgh in that matchup last week. But overall, his play has been solid. It's exactly why the Bills targeted him early in free agency. For as much panic as there's been about the offensive tackle spot from the Bills fans, I feel like the guard spot, the interior of this offensive line, is looking really good entering the season. So, money well spent on McGovern. And then obviously my next player that I'm going to mention is O'Cyrus Torrence. And Sean McDermott can sit there at the podium and say this is still an ongoing competition. I don't buy it, Sean. I don't buy it for a second. He has been too good, Matt. 2 preseason games. He has held up well with different defensive fronts. He has been great against the run, held up nicely in pass protection. You have Ryan Bates as this jack of all trades that can play in multiple spots in the line. You've seen him get work at center. You can play on the second team at guard. You could even arguably, if you were in an emergency, play him at right tackle for some snaps if need be. And that's great to have. But O'Cyrus Torrence has not done anything in the preseason to make me think that is not his spot. You're seeing him gel with the first team O-line, which is huge. It's so important to let these new faces and new additions gel with the players they're likely going to be playing with on Sundays. And I've been blown away with the play of Torrence through 2 preseason games.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing bad to say about Torrence at this point. He's passed every test that they've put in front of him. Sean McDermott said this was a big week for him. Going from the Colts front, that 4-3 traditional look, to then dealing with the different kind of looks you're going to see against the 3-4 defense that Pittsburgh plays. That could be a challenge for it. And I think, we're going to talk about Spencer Brown here in a moment when we get to maybe the biggest losers from this game in terms of stock and confidence level, all those kinds of things. I'm not completely down on Spencer Brown yet. We'll get to that in a moment. But like, the biggest difference is that Spencer Brown's a 3rd-year player out on the edge, struggling a bit at times to protect. And you got a rookie in O'Cyrus Torrence who held his own, whether it be in the run game or the pass game, getting compliments from Sean McDermott after a performance like that. He doesn't usually go into great detail from that perspective. So I thought that, to me, was a huge check mark for Torrence. And I totally agree with you. I think the competition's over. I think Ryan Bates is a guy that they super respect. Ken Dorsey said he's going to be a big part of things moving forward, even if he doesn't win this job. So I think that they want to give maybe that respect, but I've seen enough now where I'd say you'd be crazy not to play Torrence to start the season, because we've seen what's happened. Like, they've done a good job to this point. They found his one spot. Like, they put him at right guard. Remember, they were toying with left guard, right guard in the spring. They kind of put that to bed. They locked him in at right guard. He's gotten all of his reps there. He looks comfortable. And to me, now you let the player grow in the game.
Yeah, and there was one rep that I believe was over at Cover One. They showed on Twitter the communication between Torrance and Spencer Brown pre-snap, seeing that pressure was coming, and the fact that they communicated it well with one another. They picked up the additional pressure that kept Josh Allen clean on that side of the line. That's an advanced, that's what you want to see for a rookie. It's not something that every rookie gets right out of the gate, with the communication aspect of it, with knowing your responsibilities in the with different pressure coming and different gaps. So, like you said, Torrance has passed every test to date.
Pops Mafia asked, could Vandenmark jump Brown as the starter? I want to get into that. Let's star that for now. I'll bring back that up in a moment when we get to Spencer Brown in the stock down category of this. But I want to go into one more stock up, and this is a really important one, and we'll bring a conversation into the show as well from the insider text line. Which, by the way, what I did this morning is I just put out a text, Ryan, to everybody, our 300 plus shout insiders, and I said, we're going live at 11:15. What questions do you have? And a lot of good ones came in, and that gives you the chance to drive the bus a little bit with the show, right? Like, direct how we're going. And one really interesting came up, and I'm going to get to it in a moment. But I want to talk about Dorian Williams, because to me, his stock is soaring over the last couple of weeks, knowing what's going on at the middle linebacker spot and the fact that Sean McDermott hasn't tried him there yet. In a game situation. There was a clip that Eric Turner from Cover One put out where it was a goal line set, and he was out there with AJ Klein, and it almost looked like he was in the middle linebacker spot, but he wasn't. He was in there with AJ Klein, who was playing middle linebacker. It was just how they were lined up, and Eric Turner even mentioned, like, it's kind of irrelevant. Like, a lot of times, like, they went back and talked about this in years past. Like, Tremaine Edmonds, is the Mike linebacker in the sense that he calls the defense and all. But once the snap happens, like, they're doing a lot of similar things. So I just wonder if we get to a point, and this to me coming up here is the game where if you were ever going to try him in that spot and have somebody help him with him, whether it be Matt Milano, whether it be somebody else, whoever you need to do it, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, have somebody help Dorian Williams and just see what it looks like after the snap. Like, maybe you've got that part of it figured out. Tyrell Dotson and AJ Klein both got compliments from Sean McDermott from their command of the huddle, their ability to kind of operate the defense. But, you saw a big pass play for a touchdown on the second drive. You saw a 62-yard run touchdown on the first drive. Maybe you need to shake things up a little bit. And I've seen enough from Dorian Williams to where I want to see more now.
Yeah, I've been impressed with him. He was actually on my winners list. I have another name, though, that for one last one there. But Dorian Williams has shown impressive traits, recognition, diagnosing where he needs to be, what gaps he needs to kind of fill on this defense when he's out there on the field. You can see why the Bills kind of fell in love with this player pre-draft leading up to the draft. And like you said, this preseason game coming up, the third preseason game, might be the ideal opportunity to actually let him play the quote-unquote Mike position. Like you said, a lot of similarities to what Milano does, and what Tremaine Edmonds does in terms of pre-snap in the past. It's a lot of similarities, but give him that, the green dot, so to speak. Put a veteran at outside linebacker next to him if need be, but let him kind of run the show, because in the third preseason game, you very rarely see the starters playing very long. That used to be the dress rehearsal game when there were 4 preseason games, but now this is kind of like the final evaluation, so to speak. And while Dorian Williams doesn't need to be evaluated for a roster spot, this would be a great chance to get him out there to see how he would do in a role that's slightly different than what they've expected him to date.
Andy Narotsky with one of my favorite questions to date in the Shout Insider group. And by the way, if you want to sign up for that, just text us 716-528-6727. Send a text. You'll get a response back. You'll sign up. You get a 2-week free trial, $3.99 a month. After that, just give it a try. Try us out for the first month even. 1 cup of coffee, and you kind of get to figure out if it would be for you. He asks, Andy does, long-winded question. Been playing the new Madden and noticed, at least with my settings, the highest overall configuration for the defense has Taryn playing boundary cornerback and Taylor Rapp slipping inside a nickel. Obviously, I understand it's an unrealistic video game, but this got me thinking in terms of the middle linebacker situation. Does doing big nickel with Rapp or Neal as the middle linebacker, quote unquote, make any sense to entertain? This is the sort of thing that I think is a shortcoming for McDermott. There might be an optimal situation that's off the beaten path that he won't entertain because it's abnormal. Short version, would you rather have AJ Klein or Taylor Rapp be starter in that last middle linebacker spot? So a couple of things to unpack here. My first thoughts on this, and I do love this question, and I do love thinking outside the box. And honestly, like sometimes I think that it's worth criticizing the Bills, whether it be Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane or some combination of the two, for the situation they now find themselves in at middle linebacker, not going out and getting a little bit more aggressive, maybe to kind of pursue a Levante David who could come in here as a veteran to compete for the job. That doesn't completely rule out the chance that Terrell Bernard could rise to the occasion or Dorian Williams could and win the job, but at least it's a fail-safe in case it doesn't work out. And Levante David didn't get crazy money, Ryan. Like, I think they could have done something in this very important window to potentially even upgrade at that position. Some people would argue that David's an upgrade over Tremaine Edmonds. I don't know if I would argue that, but like there's some people that would. So I think that that's valid. The problem with putting like a Taylor Rapp or Saran Neal in an every down situation at the middle of the defense, the wear and tear. I mean, I just don't think from a body perspective, they're big enough to play that position, to take on blocks, to go up against interior offensive linemen, get kind of in the nasty, they both do it, right? Saran Neal and Taylor Rapp, when they're out there, they do it, but they're not asked to do it consistently over the course of a game the way the middle linebacker will have to do. And so I think, to me, the best path forward is maybe handing the job to AJ Klein, because you know what you get with him at a minimum, and hoping that Terrell Bernard can mix in and eventually take over that spot sometime during the season.
Yeah, love the question, Andy. I think that the big nickel can be a package that they run from time to time, but like Matt said, the wear and tear of it all. And, the other thing too is Taylor Rapp is going to be a key player for this defense. In my opinion, he might not play as many reps as the key starters, but they have a role in mind for him. And if you have him out there all the time playing at that, the quote unquote middle linebacker type of role, if something were to happen to Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer, and all of a sudden now your safety depth has taken a hit, and it kind of would make you have to reconfigure what you're doing on the fly there. So while I think the big nickel can be a package that they utilize from time to time, it's not something that they can go with on an every down type of basis. AJ Klein, I had some pushback when I said he's lost a step or two from the course of his career, which surprised me. He's definitely lost a step or two from his earlier days in the league, but he can still kind of be an adequate starter if you need to. You hope, again, the sum of the parts around them help him rise to the occasion, play a good brand of football, while you're hoping that a Terrell Bernard can develop, a Dorian Williams, if the Bills decide to go that route, can develop. And then obviously the outside of the box, not outside the box, but the other option is when these roster cutdowns happen, there are going to be some middle linebacker options that might appeal to the Bills that they can bring in. Now, how quickly can those players get up to speed on this defense, feel comfortable in this defense? That's a whole nother matter, but I wouldn't be shocked to see them add some tackle depth, some linebacker options, after roster cutdowns, because when they initially announced their 53-man roster, that's not truly set in stone, because you can claim players that go unclaimed, you can go out and still try to sign elsewhere. So it's going to be interesting based on the cuts around the league too.
Right. And I think another thing that threw a wrench into the plans the Bills had going into this season is that they had AJ Klein as that veteran fail-safe. They also had Tyler Matakevich, Ryan, who has played middle linebacker for them as in a depth role. Like, I thought he was actually pretty good. I can't remember if it was last year in the preseason or the year before. I thought he had a couple really good games, and I thought, oh man, if they ever had to be in a situation where he had to play, I'd like to see what that looks like. I mean, he plays really fast. He's obviously very experienced, but that injury coming into training camp really put him back. As a matter of fact, he didn't even play. At least I'm looking up if he had any special teams snaps, but he did not play on defense. Did you notice Matakevich at all in the game?
No, I did not. So I again, they're probably slow playing him. I know he's recently come off the pop, but it's the same. They're slow playing a lot of these injuries, making sure that the players are completely healthy for the regular season. Like in the case of like a Damian Harris, who didn't play. Dawson Knox had the minor finger injury. He didn't play. So I think they're just erring on the side of caution with a lot of these guys. And, I still think Matakevich makes this roster at the end of the day, but a lot of these guys, whether they're roster locks or not, they have a lot of reps under their belt with the Bills, the players that I mentioned, and the Bills don't really need to see a lot out of them in the preseason.
If you have some time today, head over to Tops and quench your thirst for savings, because Tops is heating up all of the summer savings. You can get $5 in cool cash. You get 1 point for every dollar you spend on the brands that you love, like Mountain Dew, Pepsi, Polar, Gold Peak, Gatorade, Tim Hortons, Red Bull, Dunkin' Donuts, you name it. All your favorite brands now until September 2nd. So time is running out. Ask your cashier to redeem your points for a coupon offer. Your next shopping trip, you get 35 points is equal to $5 in cool cash. Very cool stuff, Ryan. All right, we gotta flip the script here a little bit. Get into some of the players that maybe had their stock fall a little bit. If you're watching on YouTube, over 200, thank you so much on this. A little bit of a curveball, a little mid-afternoon episode of Shout. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. We're almost up over 9,000. We appreciate all you guys coming around along for the ride. I got to start with my biggest arrow down, stock dropping to be Spencer Brown. And, there's a lot that goes into the Spencer Brown conversation, right? Like, I think that he's still a third-year player. I think that that's part of not only the evaluation, but how you have to look at this when you discuss, when he has a bad game. I'm expecting bad games this season, right? Like, I'm expecting him to, be overwhelmed at times, to face really good pass rushers, have a couple of bad snaps. This was kind of collectively just a really bad afternoon. And what I think is it causes a bit of a panic because of the situation the Bills find themselves in at tackle. They didn't bring somebody in to legitimately compete with Spencer Brown. I go back to the summer and the spring, and I adamantly said this, Ryan, on this show. Brandon Shell was never competition for Spencer Brown. He was a depth player that could give you some versatile swing tackle potential to play in a pinch. But I thought he was just as bad as Spencer Brown. You wouldn't go out and bring competition for Spencer Brown and bring in one of the handful of guys from last year that were as bad as he was. So I'm still expecting a big jump. I think this was a really tough matchup, facing TJ Watt, facing Alex Highsmith, even Marcus Golden, who is a veteran pass rusher. Yeah. It was a bad day, and Spencer Brown has to kind of bounce back from this.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to a question from Mark Henry in the subtext about if Spencer Brown doesn't progress, how long is his leash? His leash is pretty much one of those elastic leashes, Matt. I mean, I don't see any end in sight on it, and here's why: because of the depth behind him, and what you just said. The Bills didn't bring any legitimate competition for him. If you were to bench Spencer Brown, who's going to be his replacement right now, would be David Quessenberry, and I don't think the Bills or Bills fans have a ton of confidence in this guy either. So, while the arrow might be pointing down to Spencer Brown, it's hard to say that he's at risk of losing his job as of right now on August 21st, sitting here because of the competition, the depth behind him. The Vandenmark, who I mentioned earlier, I think he's more exclusively at the left side. So really it comes down to Quessenberry as the only other option. Yes, they could go out and they could still trade for a guy. They could go out and they could sign someone after roster cut downs. But it's hard to imagine him getting off of the starting rotation. And like you said, there's going to be some ups and downs this year for sure. But hopefully, to what Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott have said all offseason, he takes that leap that they're kind of expecting him to take. Now, for me, Matt, is it okay if I double dip in my arrows down?
Bring it down.
I'm going with two players here, and I'll address them both separately, but Tyrell Dodson and Cairo Elam. Starting with Dodson, going into this game, he was still kind of slotted in as that starting Mike linebacker for this team. And he didn't impress again with the ones. You mentioned some big plays allowed. He was playing into the fourth quarter. I don't think that ever bodes well for a player who is competing for a starting job or was the proverbial favorite to be playing in the fourth quarter of a preseason game when you're out there with a lot of the threes on your team. So I think that was kind of a clear message sent to Dodson, saying that, we need more from you. We need to see more reps out there. You're not doing enough with the ones. And This was someone that was kind of waiting for his opportunity to become a starter in this league. He had a lot of knowledge of this system. When Edmonds left, it made a lot of sense for him to kind of get a look in that role. He just hasn't lived up to the part. And then when it comes to Elam, again, a player that was competing for a starting job in the summer, was out there late in the third quarter, possibly early in the fourth quarter as well, drew another penalty in this game. That's back-to-back games where he's drawn pass interference penalty. And we've talked about how as undisciplined as the Bills were as a whole, Sean McDermott does not tolerate when players extend drives like that. So I'm hard pressed to see a path to him being a starter. And year two, being a former first round pick and you're not getting, a lot of starting opportunities, or you're not being able to win a starting job, that's an arrow way down for me.
Yeah. And the Elam stuff is so interesting to me. And I think it's, as a case study with this organization and with the way that they built this roster, it's so intriguing because we have data to point to before the Bills were ever on the clock or traded up to get him. Like all of these different examples for the first 5 seasons of how they built this thing, and the wins in the draft, the losses in the draft, like trying to figure out how aligned everybody was in that draft room on Elam, to me, is really important part of this conversation, because to me, it's almost like Elam's been set up to fail a bit, right? Like they're asking him to become, maybe I shouldn't even go so far as to say set up to fail. Like I think that might be a little bit of aggressive, but I almost feel like when you have a guy that you're basically turning into a completely different style of player, you have to go over the top on your end to give him every opportunity and exhaust every resource to unlock him and to make him feel comfortable. And I just don't know if, like, just the way you hear about coaches talking about him, and like, I get they want everybody to earn their place, and I respect all of that. But everybody you talk to about Cairo Elam raves about his work ethic, right? So to me, that's got to be one of those guys that you prioritize and maybe work through things. Like, here's my pushback on going with Dane Jackson or Christian Benford still, even after them both being probably ahead of Elam at this point. You know what you're getting there, right? There's a ceiling to what you're going to get with both of those players. Maybe not as much with Benford. Like, we haven't seen him in an extended run yet. Maybe there is a higher ceiling. Like, he's super competitive. I thought that pass breakup he had the other night was really strong. But with Elam, aren't you still in a position as an organization to where you want to let a young player? How would Josh Allen be Josh Allen today? And I know this is a crazy comparative, but like, how would he be him if he didn't get to go through the highs and lows of that rookie season? Like, I'm pretty sure he's on record saying that was super important to his growth, going out there, figuring out what doesn't work against elite players for other teams week in and week out. And if you don't give that opportunity to Cairo Elam, how are you going to figure out if he can do it or not?
Yeah, that's a great point. Zach D in the comments saying, calm down. He's 22 years old. It's only his second season. I get all of that. But he's a former first-round pick that the Bills traded up to get, and he's still struggling to beat out Dane Jackson and Christian Benford for a starting job. And not all of that falls on him because, like you said, Matt, work ethic is off the charts. It's just in terms of being a fit for this defense and not giving him the necessary reps to get comfortable with said defense. So now here we are, a few weeks away from the regular season, and we still don't necessarily know what the Bills have in Elam. He flashed last year. When he was on the field in games. That regular season interception against the Chiefs showed his ability to kind of read Mahomes, who is one of those quarterbacks that you never know what he's going to do. But he made a great play on a ball in the end zone. He made some nice plays against the Dolphins late in the year. He flashed when given the opportunity, but he's not getting that extended run. And seeing him play so deep into this last preseason game makes me think that the Bills kind of are closing the book on him being that CB2. And maybe I'll be wrong and they'll shock me and they'll name him their opening day starter. But you don't usually see players like that playing deep into preseason games.
Right. And I do agree with some of the commentary though. Like when you say like relax, like of course it's still very early in here, right? Like maybe he doesn't win the job, maybe he goes into the game like week 6 or week 7, becomes the starter after a couple of strong games and turns into a Pro Bowl level player, and all of this is, preseason fodder, and that's fine. I just wonder how much the organization is aligned internally on these kinds of decisions. The Torrance pick to me is the example of how you should treat a top first or second round draft pick, and giving them the opportunity to play. Now he has been good, but like we talked about in training camp, there were days when he wasn't. And
Yeah.
so like he's had his ups and downs just like everybody else. Now he's taken full advantage of his games. But what happens in week 1 against the Jets if things don't go well against Quinn Williams? Are you going to pull him out and put back in Ryan Bates? Like I just think you have to have a plan, and maybe they do, and we're never going to be privy to it. So this is kind of like a moot point, but yeah, I think that's enough on that. Let's go to this is a good conversation. We're going to have it continuously on Cairo Elam throughout the course of the season. Let's get to another arrow down. Did you have any more, or it was my turn, right? Oh no, it's my turn. I'm going to go with this. This is not going to be a popular one. Matt Milano.
Ooh.
Can we talk about Matt Milano for a second?
Sure.
Is there any concern with how the way the defense played? I believe it was his responsibility. He was tagged with the touchdown by PFF in coverage. His coverage grade, by the way, in this game, really bad. 36.2, the worst of any Bills defensive player in the game. How much, Ryan, are you fearful that the absence of Tremaine Edmonds and the lack of consistency at middle linebacker could potentially impact Matt Milano? And I also want to say, people ask, like, why not put the green dot on Matt Milano's helmet? Part of what makes Matt Milano so great is his freedom in the defense is to just kind of fly around and just be that attack missile for this defense. And I think muddying the waters with asking him to call some stuff pre-snap, I think challenges things. But I think that there could be a legitimate concern. This is something I'm just kind of floating out there. We'll see how it kind of materializes. Maybe they get to week 1 and all their ducks are in a row and I look like an idiot. But I don't know. There's like a little like pinch of concern over the way that Matt Milano looked in this game.
And I think a pinch of concern is a good way of putting it. It's a very minor concern in my eyes, but obviously if you take away someone that you've worked with almost your entire NFL career, because obviously Milano came into the league 1 year before Edmonds, but essentially you've played almost every down with this player and you know exactly what the other player is thinking. You know that they're going to have all their bases covered. It allows Matt Milano to be Matt Milano and play freely and make those plays and that we've become accustomed to seeing from him. So if you have a letdown at middle linebacker, if the play is not as good, that puts almost more pressure on Milano, more responsibility maybe on him, or it allows him to kind of have those letdowns in coverage as he was kind of great in this last game. I will say that he had really good coverage on that Freiermuth touchdown pass that Kenny Pickett threw. Pickett just put it in a great spot where Milano, even though he was going right down the field with him, he just couldn't get to it because of where it was placed. I believe it was over the left shoulder of Milano when I was on the rewatch. It was just a perfect ball, essentially. And we've seen Josh Allen do that. We've seen some top-tier QBs do that where someone has great pressure or great coverage, and the quarterback just makes a play on it. So, that one play, I know a lot of fans like, oh, Milano got beat on that. It was great coverage. It was just a perfect throw. So I wouldn't read too much into that specific play. But, yeah, I think a pinch of concern is a fair way of putting it, Matt, because we don't know what this looks like without steady middle linebacker play that the Bills have been able to get, and more than steady linebacker play. Edmonds is a lot better than a lot of fans gave him credit for. He just didn't make enough splash plays necessarily. So definitely someone that I think it's okay to say, yeah, I'm concerned about him in terms of what this could look like.
Yeah, and some good points in the comments over on YouTube. When Edmonds has missed a game or two over the last couple of years, I thought Milano has played really well. So that's probably not maybe it's just a game where there was just a couple of spots where you're dealing with some new pieces out there, and you're dealing with actually reacquainting yourself with Micah Hyde in a lot of ways, right? Like, maybe, he's kind of getting back up to full speed, and, what's going on with Jordan Poyer, who missed some time last year. Like, I think the best way to end this whole episode and conversation and put a bow on this game, it's preseason, right? Like, it's a game where you're trying different stuff. You're, I do think there's probably various levels of how much do you get up for this game as a perennial Super Bowl contender. If you're a Dion Dawkins, like, and I'm not putting this out there on him or anything, but I think just subconsciously you probably operate differently in a game like this, knowing it's a preseason game. You got to get through 3 of them, and then the real ones start. So I don't think it's healthy to overreact to it. I do think, what is it? Jeremy White over at WGR, he's got the preseason pledge, where I will not overreact. Right. No, it is what it is.
Yeah, this team, I think that even with the struggles against Pittsburgh, pre-snap penalties, sloppy play, they are still confident in their starters, their roster, their talent, and they're going to be ready for week 1 against a very tough Jets defensive line, a very tough defense in general, an offense that obviously upgraded the QB position going from Wilson to Rodgers. So, they're going to be tested very quickly, though, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Bills respond.
All right, so I do want to get to Pops Mafia real quick before we get out of here. He brought up the Vandenmark question. If Brown continues to struggle, could Vandenmark pass him? Now, I think that gets very complicated because as good as Vandenmark's looked at left tackle, he's looked really bad, worse than Brown, I'd argue, at right tackle. And so I don't know if that's necessarily a viable replacement plan. I also think at left tackle with a healthy Dion Dawkins, like, what's the long-term plan for Dion Dawkins, right? Like, is he your left tackle of the future? If he has some struggles over the course of 8 games this year, do you start to maybe consider moving him around? Do you start to consider potentially moving off of that deal next year, which you can do? I think there's like $7-8 million in dead cap, $15 million cap hit. So you'd add about 6, 7, 8 million in that range in cap space. That's something that you're going to have to start thinking about, those hard decisions. And I think more than anything this year, Vandenmark could be a guy that if you get a couple looks at him during the season this year, maybe next year, but I don't think he's in the mix for any starting job this year.
No, I agree with that completely. I think maybe in a few years, like you said, if Brown, if Dion Dawkins declines a little bit, maybe Vandenmark can make things interesting on the left side. But I still think we're a few years away from that discussion. I think he can be a solid backup, though, at left tackle, and that's a good player, a good thing to have. Realistically, I don't see anyone on this roster being able to leapfrog Spencer Brown. I don't have a lot of faith in Questenberry playing major snaps there, and unless the Bills were truly committed to giving Ryan Bates time to kind of get acclimated to just tackle, I don't think that he would be able to leapfrog Brown either at right tackle. So right now it's just kind of a roster situation. They're going to ride this thing out this year with Brown, in my opinion, especially after they double and triple downed on him as a player, based on all the comments we heard in the offseason about how he had the back surgery last year. He didn't get to play his senior season of college. It's a lot of reps he missed out on. Now he needs to prove them right.
Donnybrook here on YouTube, one of our regulars. The Steelers front is legit. Maybe tops. Speaking of tops, craft a burger. Al, yes. Pair your favorite craft beer with your favorite craft burger. Pair delicious craft burgers with delicious craft beers. Tops has the perfect burger and beer pairing guide right now. Go to topsmarkets.com/burgers and beer. Whether you are soaking up the final days of summer or grilling out before the football game, Tops has something for everyone. They have everything you need to make the perfect burger beer combination. Check it out. Cobb salad burger pairs well with a wheat beer. A Monster Munster burger pairs well with a Belgian Pale Ale. How about a pizza turkey burger pairs well with an amber ale? And a blue cheese chipotle burger pairs well with a brown ale. Get more details over at topsmarkets.com. Ryan, that'll do it for this one.
Hey, great to talk Bills as always, Matt.
Yeah, that was shameless, Donnybrook. Thank you for the setup. You lay it up, I dunk it down, my friend. For Ryan Talbot, I am Matt Parrino. We're out of here, everybody. Enjoy your week. We'll be back on Wednesday. Take care.